And now, our feature presentation.
I like it spooky.
Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the I Like It Spooky Horror Podcast. I'm Brian.
I am Clint, and hey Brian, I have figured out how to end this world of suffering, or at least this fucking cold snap.
How's that?
You have to let me eat your brains!
You're going to be hungry after this meal.
Let's see if we can make everybody's brains a little bit bigger and report on some news.
So I got two little things from the news, both from iHorror.com. The first one is 2025 is the year of R.L. Stine. And I enjoy R.L. Stine. It's more towards the teens or maybe the younger kids, but it says 3 adaptions in the works. You know, he did Goosebumps. He's done several other books. And there's another Fear Street coming out this year. A Disney series called The Vanishing, premiering all 8 episodes on January 10th. So that's out now. You can go watch that.
I think I've heard of that. And if I'm correct, and I don't know if I am, but it kind of looked like Are You Afraid of the Dark type teen or tween supernatural drama type series.
Yeah, that might be something, gateway horror, something to watch with your younger kids and try to get them into, horror movies. Shady Side High School, Senior Prom, 88. So that's got to be the Fear Street Prom Queen one.
Yeah.
And I still need to
watch them. You will enjoy them. You will very much enjoy. I'll be surprised if you don't like them.
More mainstream stuff. I mean, it's getting on Disney Plus, so that's always a good sign for horror fans that even people at the Disney Channel are reaching out to find horror stuff because they know it's what people want to see.
Well, you know what I find interesting is horror is what people always turn back to. And regardless of how you feel about the direction that Disney went, they caught a lot of flack. And just whenever I see people try new things and they got to come back and restart, they always come back to horror. Or if you always look at some of your biggest stars, Brad Pitt, Tom Hanks, just everybody always starts with horror. It's like the building block, the foundation of everything.
And that's a great segue to my next story. It's not about big stars starting at horror. It's about big stars coming back to horror. And it's about Paul Rudd, who got his start in horror. Maybe not his big start, but he was in one of the Halloween movies.
Yeah, Halloween 6. We covered that one.
It's all right.
The best Halloween in the franchise besides part 3.
Paul Rudd and Jack Black on Christmas in 2025 have a new film coming out, and it's a remake of Anaconda. We always go to the movies on Christmas. It's a Christmas tradition. We've done it maybe 4 or 5 years in a row. I know where we will be in 2025 on Christmas Day, hopefully seeing Anaconda. They did a little video on YouTube where they are talking about the film and kind of joking around. I want to see this film.
I don't see the connection between Anaconda and Christmas. That's just when they wanted to release it because they figured they could put some butts in some seats. I saw the original Anaconda in the theater, late 90s. Loved that movie. It was a fun fucking movie. And then they made 2 or 3 kind of direct-to-video sequels, didn't they?
Yeah, there's a couple that went to streaming or, like you said, direct-to-video, VOD.
I've always been a fan of Paul Rudd. I just don't understand. I guess it's time. We haven't had a monster movie like that in a while, besides some Godzilla stuff, which is not even really in the same vein. I guess it's about time to see some more something like that.
And I just wonder with Jack Black and, there was some controversy with his band and he's kind of fallen off on some of his films lately. There was a new film that was on maybe Hulu. He played Satan, but it was a Santa Claus Christmas movie and we watched it. It was fine. And Paul Rudd's kind of had some duds with the new Ant-Man stuff. So maybe they're just we want to do something fun that we want to do.
And they want to be profitable, so they're going to go back to horror. Welcome back.
I definitely will see this one. I have to wait until Christmas, which, yeah, it's weird. It's a Christmas. But Christmas horror and Christmas movies seem to do well. Sonic's on the 3rd one, and we were there to see that, and it's making a ton of money.
There was the boom in the early 80s of all the Christmas horror movies, which were more literal on the head. Christmas Evil, Silent Night, Deadly Night, Black Christmas, Christmas, which was, 74, not early 80s. But yeah, I've noticed the past year or so, It's Me Billy 2, the new Silent Night, Deadly Night, Return of the Living Dead 2025. It seems like it's a Christmas theme with the teaser trailer of Tarman dragging the Christmas tree. So I don't know, it's like this resurgence of Christmas horror.
Well, on Terrifier 3, maybe Anaconda will have some Christmas stuff. They'll just be in, South America, and it'll be a Christmas time.
To diverge here for a minute, I finally watched Terrifier 3. That's all I have to say. That's all I have to say about it is I watched it. I'm so sorry, Brent Edgett. On to my news. So this is real short. We talk a lot about indie, and we talk a lot about streaming, and it's so hard anymore because there's so much competition, and where do you upload your film, and is it better to go to Tubi or Amazon, or I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this. It's MeView. Yeah, that's got to be the way. Filmmakers are flocking to MeView, which is a streaming platform that lets you rent out your video content. And it just says the future of indie filmmaking is here. You can go to MeView.com. I went there once and I just kind of browsed around, and it's similar to a YouTube. There's just a ton of different links you can click on of content that people have uploaded. And it just looks like another outlet for filmmakers, whether it's to put reels up to get noticed, or I don't know. I need to fish around and look through it some more, but meview.com, MEVUE, check it out because it looks like a place for filmmakers of the future.
And it's free.
We're just going to do this right now. We're going to go to meview.com right now. And I'm going to click on it with my silent mouse because Brian always yelled at me because I click. So, okay. So I'm looking through. There's categories. There's movie trailers, short films. There's a thing up at the top that shows kind of like almost like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like a rating system. So let's pick on something here. We're going to go to Clink Killers. It is a 5-minute thing. It's free. So I don't know as far as like uploading your film, but I just clicked on this 5-minute thing called Clink Killers on meview.com. And there's a 5-minute indie short film for me to watch.
Well, that's perfect for Rod and I to go and have more content, maybe for Salute the Shorts, or for us if we're looking for indie stuff to cover for Indie Spotlight.
It's definitely something to check out. It says for filmmakers, but I don't see why it couldn't be another platform for, podcasters, for just event promotion. Definitely something to check out, meview.com.
It's definitely something I'll go check out. It's probably the hardest thing for indie filmmakers is to get your film in front of people so they can see it. If there's a site where you can go and you can put your stuff on there and it's relatively cheap and where people can watch it for free, it's a way for them to get discovered. Or networking is one of the biggest things that we do, and I feel like filmmakers and people in the industry do. It's super important.
What's interesting is, and again, I really got to dive into it some more because the article that I just read, that little blurb from starting out talking about MeView, it was actually from a story from December 3rd of 2024. We've had such a busy end of the year with all the special stuff we were doing. We haven't reported on the news in a while. So I had that story saved, but it says where you can rent out your videos, but to rent means that someone's paying for it. And I just clicked on something. So maybe there's different categories. Definitely something to check out. Go to meview.com. If Brian and I don't have a chance to get to it and you guys listening, check it out. Give us your feedback. Send us a message at ilikeitspookypod@gmail.com. I haven't plugged that in a while. And let us know what you think. If it's a place for us to post Brian and Rod's ugly faces.
No one's going to pay for that.
Speaking of indie projects, impromptu news. I forgot I was going to talk about this. Our friends, the filmmakers of Valentine Bluffs, a fan film. For a while, they've been working on developing an anthology of horror shorts. And they recently announced that a Tom Smith film, Tom Smith, the director of Valentine Bluffs, a fan film, is working with Nikolai Cabana, friends of ours, other people involved in that project. And soon, they're coming out with Angelica, Always Say Goodbye is the tagline. It just says coming soon. So check out stuff from Weez in Hollywood, which you can find on YouTube, WEEZ in Hollywood. Of course, you can always go there and watch Valentine Bluffs, a fan film, and you can see what they got going on with this new Angelica project.
I saw the poster and I put it right there on my radar. It's something that I feel like I want to see and something that we are probably going to cover at some point, hopefully.
Plus, we got the ends, so we can get we got the ins and the outs, so we can get the interviews. This is actually the last news story that I want to talk about, and it kind of fits with the movie we're covering later. We are finally, I can't believe it's taken us this long, but we're finally covering the original Return of the Living Dead, Brian's all-time favorite movie. Pretty much mine. If I had to write a list right now, it would be in the top 3 of my all-time favorite horror movies and all-time favorite zombie flicks. For a while, the George Romero Resident Evil, a documentary, has been talked about, been teased. Of course, George Romero was at one point going to be attached to the original original Resident Evil movie way back in the day. I can't remember how long it's taken this thing. It's been a few years. It's finally going to be released, available digitally and on demand on January 7th, and it's going to be available on all the platforms. Yeah, watch Apple TV, Amazon, Xbox, YouTube, Fandango, Direct Dish. I could go on and on. Finally, we get to see a documentary that brings to light the vision that George Romero had for an adaptation of Resident Evil, and it's going to be using newly filmed interviews with those who were there, and it unravels the secrets behind why it was never produced. And it's directed by Brandon Salisbury. I just can't wait to see this thing. I've wanted to see it for so long.
It'll be interesting to see what happened, why it never came to be. I would imagine it would have went in a totally different direction if he was part of the film, right?
From everything that I've read, and I don't know if this was the reason why he didn't do it, but yeah, everybody can just assume that he would have taken it towards a darker, more serious horror movie tone, as opposed to kind of the action horror video game. And that movie, when Resident Evil first came out, it almost kind of kicked off that era of the action horror video game tie-in stuff, real clean. And I think George would have made it more humanistic and a little more gritty, a little more gory.
Just more stuff I won't have time to watch.
Did you ever see the trailer for the original Resident Evil 2, I think it was, game that came out back in the day? And it was a George Romero directed trailer for that game.
Oh, no.
It's pretty cool. Go look it up on YouTube.
I'll have to check that out after I put my movies away that I bought this month.
You bought stuff?
Yeah.
We're coming off of Christmas and you bought stuff?
I always buy stuff.
So are you poor or are you not poor?
Kind of poor? Is there a middle ground there?
I don't think so.
So on this episode of Why Are We Poor? I'm not too poor because I didn't buy anything super expensive. And one thing I'm sharing is something that I bought last year, months ago, years ago. Hell, I don't even know. We have a new Goodwill in town. They moved to a bigger area, built a new building. So I went and grabbed some movies there. I don't know if you have Big Lots up your way.
Yeah, but I think they're like filing for bankruptcy.
They are, and they were all going to go out of business, but they have a buyer now, so some of the stores are going to stay open. But I did jump into Big Lots, and I picked up a couple movies. The Eyes of My Mother, which I love this film. I've talked about it before.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that.
And Blood Quantum. I don't know if you've seen this one or not.
I have seen that movie. Isn't it an Australian? No.
Canadian.
Yeah.
And Canadian, I don't even know how you would say it. Natives, because they're Indians in the film. It's fun. I enjoy it. I wouldn't even say it's fun. It's a really good movie.
I remember I didn't hate it. I thought it dragged in spots, but I liked it. Yeah, I wasn't like, oh, fuck that movie. I'm never going to watch it again.
And then I jumped over to Goodwill. Finley and I checked that out for the first. These were $1 a piece. The Collector.
Oh, I can't believe that's $1. That's such a travesty because it's such a good movie.
And this one's still sealed. Silent Rage.
You sent me a message. You're like, what are the chances of me finding Silent Rage sealed at Goodwill? I was like, fuck, I don't think I responded. I was like, I don't know.
For $1. They're DVDs, so I mean, they're cheap, but for $1? And with physical media, was an article a couple weeks ago about physical media and how it's going to become more expensive to be a collector and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh, it's already fucking expensive. But these are ways that you can continue to grow your collection and not break the bank. You can hit up thrift stores and Goodwills and Salvation Armies and your local antique shops and buy stuff and help keep them open. You may not have the 4K of Silent Rage, but you have Silent Rage.
Well, that's like last night. I sat down and I have a DVD copy. It's not Blu-ray. It's not, 4K restoration, whatever, of Return of the Living Dead. And I put it in my old Emerson combo DVD VHS player. And the quality was you could tell it was a little off, not as crisp and clean, but I still have it. If that movie ever went away, I have a copy I can watch.
And then the last thing, I don't even remember when I grabbed this, but it's from our friends at Bootleg as Fuck Toys, and it's my Return of the Living Dead brains from the Tarman.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Go check out Bootleg as Fuck Toys. He's doing super cool stuff. He just did a Godzilla one, and I was like, oh, I want that one. I want it. I don't know if you ever seen Godzilla -1, but they have a little floaty thing because they're trying to sink Godzilla. It's just the little floaty thing.
Yeah, I saw that post. I haven't seen the movie. I got to talk with Josh to see what his plans are, what his lineup is for 2025 as far as conventions.
Yeah, the news of flashbacks really hitting hard.
Ooh, yeah. So hopefully we're going to be able to make it to Flashback. They announced that they also have the National Sports Card Trading Show going on at the same time at the Stevenson Center across the street from the convention center where Flashback's at. So because of that, apparently there are already no rooms available at the Hyatt for Flashback.
Or the Crown.
Yeah, and then Brian did research and found that there's like within a 20-mile radius, there's not even anything available. So I don't know what that means. And it sucks because that was the one convention I was going to do this year. I was going to vend with inkmirrors.com.
I went about 10 miles out, and anything within that 10 miles that was available was like $300-400 a night. And I'm just like, it's not feasible to do that.
No, and something to keep in mind in Chicago and, Rosemont, which is, the suburbs of Chicago or whatever, 10 miles is like a 2-hour fucking drive, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but still.
Yeah, if anything, if you don't go and they don't add anybody else that I want to meet, I won't go. If they add somebody that I do want to meet or Finley wants to meet, I may jump up for a day, but I'm just not going to go through the headache. I mean, I'm not getting Robert Englund. I'm not standing in line. I'd have to leave my house Friday night to get there to get in the line for Saturday morning.
Yeah, it'd be one thing different if we were staying on site.
And the Terrifier cast, they're great. They bring a lot of people in. People love them, but they were just there 2 years ago. There's nothing for me.
I've vended at other shows, big shows, like Scarefest in Kentucky, and stayed at a hotel that was not there on site at the venue. But it's a 5-minute drive or a 10-minute drive. I remember Midwest Monster Fest when I met you, Brian, the hotel, because I got in that kind of last minute at Midwest Monster Fest, and the hotel nearby was already full. Jeff, it's been forever since I thought about him. I almost forgot his name. Jeff had some blocks like across the bridge. And so it was like a 15-minute, not even that, a 10-minute drive at another hotel. So it was no big deal. I don't know. Well, Mike and Mia, who put on Flashback, are great people. And I know they're doing everything they can to accommodate everybody. So we'll see what's going to happen in the near future. And hopefully we can still be a part of the show, because this will be, the 4th year of being at Flashback for me, vending. That's just kind of our home.
And if not, we'll go back next year, because the National moves every year. It's in Chicago at Rosemont, I think every 4 years. So next time it's there, we'll just have to play them better.
Exactly. I wish I would have known ahead of time, because I would have jumped and got a room. Rebecca's brother's already got a room. I hope I can go, because I usually make a decent little chunk of change at Flashback. Thank you, Flashback, for always being good to me, which is the reason that's the one show I was going to do this year. I've got so much going on that I was going to pull back from traveling and focus on some stuff here domestically. But I need to make the money, because I am poor, because I'm coming off of Christmas. I still have 2 more birthdays to go. Plus, my oldest was just nominated for homecoming court, so she just bought a dress yesterday. I wasn't involved in this kind of stuff when I was in high school, so I don't remember it being like this. We're putting together a full-on media promotional blitz for things for her to hand out at school to vote for me, vote for me, vote for me. So spent a decent little chunk of change on putting things together for her to hand out, colored sunglasses with, vote for Hannah on the side. And I've got these like foam fingers, like the big foam hands. It's like the finger you put on your hand, but we've got little finger ones. And I had to buy a special screen and some special ink, and we're going to screen print some stuff on there. It's fun, but it costs money and it takes time. So probably nothing about the collection. I'm just babbling about personal expenses, really, because I haven't been able to buy anything for the personal collection or anything really horror related. But what I did buy, and this is the thing that probably set me back the most, Boot's birthday is coming up. She's turning 14. Besides going to, when her and I went to see Goblin, and that was a couple Octobers ago. I'm trying to think of what else. That's pretty much it. She's never been to a real deal concert. We had tickets to take her around the time of COVID, so she was a little bit younger, but because then COVID hit and we weren't able, so she's kind of been cheated out of concerts. So I got 4 Boots for her birthday for her and I to go see Weird Al at Pine Knob.
How come you're always such a fussy young man? Don't want no Captain Crunch, don't want no Raisin Bran. Well, don't you know that other kids are starving in Japan? So eat it, just eat it.
And since she's been cheated, I got fucking good seats. I mean, we're like 10 rows back from the stage, off to the side a little bit. Those were a little expensive. I'm excited about that.
That sounds way more fun than what I'm taking Finley to go to this month.
Well, but see, that's the thing, is you take Finley to go do stuff all the time. My days of day trips with my kids are kind of coming to an end because they're getting older and doing their own things. So what are you taking Finley to do?
Go see a Taylor Swift DJ.
Yes, my thing sounds way fucking cooler than what you are taking Finley to do. So also, I just want to talk about another reason while I'm poor, so we can hurry up and get away from Taylor Swift stuff. Have fun, Brian. And Evil Dead, the pinball machine. I just wanted to give an update. So I talked about this on the past couple, I think we covered Black Christmas a few episodes ago, and I was fumbling for the name of the charity, but I have it in front of me now. It is Project Pinball charity. Go check them out on Facebook. They do a lot of great stuff, not just with Spooky Pinball. They work with Stern and other companies. But what their mission is they are a charity that places pinball machines in children's hospitals across the nation. And there's more to it than that, but it's a super good cause to bring smiles. And even, pinball machine, you think about it, hand-eye coordination. So if you put it in a rehabilitation center, it actually has a benefit, an actual benefit besides smiles and good spirits. So, but the Evil Dead pinball machine. So when I talked about it last, they had a raffle. One entry was $130. Bought an entry, didn't win. Well, since then they announced a second one. So I bought an entry into that, didn't win. Then they did a third one, bought an entry into that, and I didn't win. So then they did 3 more back to back to back. And they had a deal with Spooky Pinball that if they could sell out 3 back to back to back Evil Dead raffles, then Spooky would donate a Scooby-Doo pinball machine to place in some children's hospital somewhere. And they did. They sold out. Sadly, I did not take place in the final 3 because it got to a point where I'm like, dude, Christmas, all this stuff I'm talking about, birthdays, I got to draw the line somewhere. And if I would have bought entries in those 3, all of a sudden, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, we're talking like $1,000. So I did what I could. I didn't win it, and I can't make my money back. So I'm just poor and sad.
Sounds like we need well, I didn't really spend a lot of money.
Will you be my sponsor?
I don't know I don't have anything to sell.
Bullshit. Look around your room. You have movies you don't even know about. You probably have 6 or 7 copies of the same fucking movie.
Like Blood Quantum.
Let's take it to a sponsor.
Aren't you tired of seeing the same old mainstream movies bouncing back and forth on the same old streaming services? Don't let these conglomerate cartels burn your hard-earned cash. There must be a better way! There is, and it's called Troma Now.
Who said that?
That's right. Troma Now is your destination for exclusive, one-of-a-kind cult titles, old and new.
Wow, so many to choose from. Poultrygeist, Night of the Chicken Dead, Citizen Toxie, Terra Firma, Return to Nukem High Volume 2. Heck, I think I'll watch them all.
Hey, Michael, bring me some butter. I need some butter. Oh, such consistent, high-quality new releases. You will never have to go back to watching these elite, devil-worshipping international conglomerates streaming services. Step up to Troma Now and have some of Uncle Lloydie's popcorn.
Thanks, Uncle Lloydie. Troma Now! It's the future.
What now?
Subscribe today at troma-now.com. The first month is free and only $4.99 a month thereafter.
So now that we've heard from our sponsor, it's time for our movie, the 1985 American comedy horror film. Do you think they set out for this to be a comedy?
I don't know why it's labeled as a comedy. People who have listened to this show, we've talked about this movie more than any other movie. I don't feel it is a comedy. I know it had some elements where you had zombies talking like the Send More Cops, so it had a lighthearted approach. I do not think this was a comedic movie.
So we're talking about my favorite horror film and one of Clint's favorite horror films, The Return of the Living Dead. And we talked about this on the last episode where we talked about 2025 horror. Is this a sequel? Is this a reboot, a requel? What is this? Because it builds off the original story.
So what happened is John Russo, who with George Romero and Image 10 made Night of the Living Dead, he wrote a screenplay. Him and Russ
Streiner.
Thank you. His last name, just my mind blanked. Wrote Return of the Living Dead, which was a sequel for Night of the Living Dead. And it took place 10 years after the original. Zombies were still around, and it was about a family being terrorized in a rural town by looters, which kind of, if you think about it, that kind of set the stage for The Walking Dead to a degree. Producer of Return of the Living Dead, Tom Fox, bought Russo's script, and O'Bannon, who directed the film, refused to shoot the film based on such a serious, straightforward horror film. He didn't want to necessarily make a comedy, but he wanted to make something a little more fun. So it is sort of a sequel, but it's not. They just took Russ and John's script and then completely reworked it into what we know of today.
Well, and it's because of legal issues. I wouldn't know if it was legal issues, but when George and Russ, when they split, or John Russo, and they split, George kept part of the Living Dead part?
No, so he kept the dead. George and John agreed that going forward that they were going to continue to make zombie movies, and John Russo was going to keep the Living Dead. And George was just going to go with the dead, and they were just going to take it in opposite directions. And I think it was creative differences. They just had different visions of where they wanted the franchise or any of the sequels to go.
Which now in hindsight, I'm sure probably sucked for them at the time, but we all made out like fucking bandits, right?
Well, at least for the first film, and maybe the second, and definitely the third. But then when you get to the fourth and the fifth, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. You're talking about legal issues. I'm going to jump all around in this episode because what I did was I've seen this movie so many times. I did watch it last night because Rebecca and I wanted to watch a movie. I was like, well, shit, let's watch this. I didn't do this like I normally do because I know this movie inside and out. So I just hopped on the Internet Movie Database. Yes, Rod, I said the Internet Movie Database, and just looked up some trivia facts, which there is a lot for this film. Something I came across was Richard Rubenstein, who was the producer over at Laurel Entertainment and what Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead and Romero films, got an injunction trying to stop Return of the Living Dead filmmakers from using Living Dead because he didn't want people to think that it was part of Romero's universe and legacy and continuation. But the courts ruled that since Romero agreed to stop using Living Dead and everything that we just talked about with him and Russo, that injunction fell apart.
Well, and it sounds like they had some issues getting funding for this film because I found that Tobe Hooper was originally set to direct.
Yeah, it was supposed to be in 3D from what I read.
They couldn't get money to make it, so he backed out and did Life Force, which Dan O'Bannon was a co-writer on the screenplay. Just a lot of weird stuff. I love this film, but I'm more of a sit down and watch a film and enjoy the film, not dig deep into everything about it. So a lot of the stuff I'm doing trivia stuff and looking for notes is the first time I'm seeing this. The tracks and the 245, and the movie was by the Darrow Chemical Company. And I guess it was like a play on the Dow Chemical Company.
Correct.
That with the Agent Orange, I never knew that. I wouldn't even have thought of that, but it makes sense. And the more the military's in it and stuff like that, it totally makes sense. But sitting down to watch this, I've watched this film probably 100 fucking times, but I've never dug that deep into it. I just enjoy the film.
What's interesting about Return of the Living Dead is Return of the Living Dead was in a way Blair Witch before Blair Witch. Now let me explain. So Blair Witch, when that came out, you had the whole campaign of the Sci-Fi Channel where there was these documentaries, and so it made you think that it was real. And again, I've said on air before that I was a mark. I was one of the suckers. I actually bought into, I think this is a legit thing until I watched the first couple frames, of the film in the theater opening night. Return of the Living Dead did that. They almost made it like it was like an Unsolved Mysteries kind of recreation mockumentary where just like the disclaimer at the beginning of the movie, all these events are true, just the names have been changed. So it kind of plays into this shit really happened, but we're not going to talk about Dow Chemical Company. We're going to talk about Darrow.
Early in the film, when he's talking about, that movie, Night of the Living Dead, it really happened. And he's giving you this story that makes perfect sense, that they had to change the names because they were going to get sued and the government was going to come after them and all this stuff. So it makes perfect sense.
And I also think that little blurb right there that just was probably brought up on the spot from Dan O'Bannon, it spurred so much interest because to this day, Return of the Living Dead fans talk about, I want a prequel. I want a movie at the VA hospital. I want the original breakout. I want to see what happened.
That has never crossed my mind until now, but that would be a blast.
And that's also like people talk about they want a movie or even a short with the origins of the Tar Man. That right there is, you could all be one thing.
And you kind of get the military breakout in part 3, so you could build off that. You could go back further and do the prequel. But yeah, you could go on forever with this. They're going to. There's more movies coming in 2025 from this universe, finally. And hopefully they're not Necro, whatever the hell that one was. It came on after.
Necropolis and Rave from the Grave, just terrible.
I watched Return of the Living Dead on Tubi. I own it on probably 5 different forms of physical media, but I was like, it's on Tubi. I'll just put it on. I watch it, and I thought it would go to part 2, but it skipped to part 3, and I love part 3, so I watched that. And it had been a while since I'd seen that, and then it went to Necro, whatever the hell it was, and I was like, okay, we're not watching this.
I remember watching Necropolis and Rave to the Grave like back to back on the Sci-Fi Channel. Rave to the Grave was actually more fun To be honest with you, they were both just terrible fucking movies. Back to the comedy thing. We've talked about this so much. I'm not going to exhaust the conversation here on that. I don't feel that Return of the Living Dead is a comedy. They do not try to be a comedy. Part 2 does. I just think that it is lighthearted in its approach. It has a couple silly situations, but for the most part, I think Return of the Living Dead, one of the reasons it's so successful is it's almost like a comic book movie with the coloring. It kind of reminded me of like Dick Tracy, just not as stylized, but a zombie movie.
You get a lot of gore in this film and a lot of serious stuff's going on. So there are comedic elements, like you said, but maybe we've pushed it to be a black comedy or people have pushed it to be a black comedy.
Black comedy is probably what should be used. A lot of people just go to comedy, but I mean, think about it. The comedic elements in this film are just one, for example, after the zombies have come out of the ground and they're attacking the paramedics, Ernie, the mortician, goes out to try to get a car or something, and he sees the midget, the little person zombie eating the brains of the paramedic, and then he's stumbling after him and he's got these little legs and he falls down, and it's just kind of slapstick kind of comedy, physical, old school Three Stooges type comedy.
Well, and early in the film, when they're trying to kill the zombie that was from the freezer, they hit him in the head with the pickaxe, and he said, well, it worked in the movie.
You mean the movie lied?
It's not a bad question, Bert.
Probably a pretty serious line, but we've seen it so many times that, I laugh every time they say that.
And that's not even necessarily comedy or black comedy. It's just meta. It's just the movie being aware of itself, just calling itself out. And it was little touches like that I think Dan O'Bannon wanted the direction he wanted to take it to, where it wasn't so serious, making fun of itself. Nothing about the line delivery or anything was comedic.
Probably the one comedic thing in it that a lot of people maybe don't know if they've only watched this a couple times or they aren't huge fans of the movie is the poster. There's a poster in the office and it's like an eye chart.
Oh, the bird is an asshole.
Yeah, and you have to read it, and a lot of people that maybe haven't seen this film 10 or 20 times or know of that would read it, but B's on top, and then you just have to kind of read it and figure out what it says.
Bird is an asshole and a cheap son of a bitch, and I forget the rest of it. Wait, hold on. I've got it on a shirt that I made for Inkmirrors.com. It's right here. Hold on. Bird is a slave driver and a cheap son of a bitch who's going bald too. Haha.
It made money. Roger Ebert gave it a 3 out of 4 stars. The New York Times seemed to like it. There was some people that were like, well, it wasn't as good as it wanted to be, but is it ever going to live up to the original Night of the Living Dead?
Which it wasn't really trying to. I think it was just referencing that it lived in that universe. So yeah, I think it had like a $4 million budget, and then opening weekend, it made like $4.5 million opening weekend, which is a good sign. I think it's up to 15 mil.
And it's been released on physical media by Shout Factory and every other person in the world. I think it's up to 4K now. So it's got DVD, Blu-ray, VHS, probably other stuff that I don't even know about. It's on Tubi. It's definitely something you can see and buy and have in your hand.
And it's also a trendsetter because although it is often hailed as one of the first movies to have running zombies, that actually was Lamberto Lenzi's Nightmare City from 1980. And that was the first zombie film where it showed reanimated corpses running. But Return of the Living Dead is mainstream enough to where it set that tone, or set the whole premise that zombies eat brains.
Why do you eat people?
Not people. Brains.
Brains only.
Yes.
Why?
The pain.
What about the pain?
The pain of being dead.
Because that's what they wanted. They wanted brains to make the pain of dying go away. Because up until then, zombies just wanted to kill you, or they wanted to eat your flesh. But now they want brains.
They want brains. They can't be killed by a shot to the brain. That was new, I believe. Usually the zombies, you could shoot them and they would die. These you got to incinerate. And even then, they're not gone because you incinerate them and then that causes it to rain.
Just brings back more.
This is one of my all-time favorites. And I actually saw the second one before I saw the first one. I caught it one night on TV, late on Cinemax or something, or HBO. And then I went back and saw the first one. So that maybe ruined it for me. The second one's not bad. It's just kind of weird that they have the same names.
It's quirky.
And the third one's better than the second one.
Which is more serious.
And plus the zombie in that one, she's hot.
Wait, the zombie in the part 2?
No, in 3.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. My brain jolted there for a second. So real quick, I don't know how to give a synopsis. Brian usually does a synopsis. But if anybody listening hasn't seen this movie, which I find that extremely hard to believe, it takes place at a medical supply warehouse in Louisville, Kentucky, where zombies are stored in these military canisters in the basement of this facility. There's this gas, this chemical called trioxin 245 that escapes from the canister, which reanimates a corpse through a series of unfortunate events, winds up escaping into the atmosphere, which brings down this acid rain, which unearths zombies from the cemetery.
Bert, Frank, we have a little problem.
Well, and one of the other things that I saw in this one was that the bites of the zombies do not reanimate people. They just die. I mean, they just chew up people and they eat their brains, so they're dead. And that changed in part 3, because part 3, her saliva reanimates them or kills them, and then they come back to life. So I was like, so how did Linnea become a zombie? But she got rained on.
Yep.
She got left outside when everybody else was running inside and was attacked by the zombies. So I don't know if in the process of them attacking her, she's in a puddle. That's rain's all going into her body. She probably drowns and is attacked, so that reanimates her. It's kind of a stretch.
It is kind of a stretch, but you can like piece together and make sense, make some cartoon logic happen. So it's like, okay, it's believable for the world that it lives in. But then you got to think, well, why didn't the paramedics come back? And then, well, maybe they did. They just didn't showcase them. The one thing about Linnea coming back that I didn't like, and it actually is the only thing about Return of the Living Dead that I did not care for, was she looked like some demon vampire. Her head was all intact, and she got mauled on by like 7 or 8 zombies.
Yeah, she didn't look like she was bit at all. So some cool trivia about this. It has several different titles. In Denmark, it's called The Corpses Do Not Care.
I love the German one. Read the German one. I love the German one.
Damn it, the zombies are coming. Greece, zombies are not vegetarians. Japan, it's called Battalion, which I've seen the Japanese posters are cool. In Taiwan, it's called Chicago Ghost. No idea. In the Netherlands, it's They Are Back in Hungary. Just some fun. I don't get the Chicago Ghost one, but yeah, the German one's great.
So something else that we got to talk about with this film, and again, it's one of those things that is, if you don't know about this, and I'm surprised, an amazing fucking soundtrack that I listen to on the daily to this day. And, we covered The Crow a while back, which The Crow came out in, 93, 94, which was fueled by an amazing soundtrack and seemed to launch an era of films that came with an amazing soundtrack with mainstream artists. I think it's got to harken back to Return of the Living Dead. It's one of the first films I can think of that really was fueled, and the feel and the direction and everything about the film was fueled by the soundtrack.
And it's mostly punk rock unknown bands or little known bands that killed this soundtrack.
They're not mainstream at all. Everybody's heard of the Cramps. There's a couple bands down there, but The Damned is huge. But I mean, the Tall Boys, everybody's like, who the hell's the Tall Boys? If you're in that circle and you like that music, they're legends. A mainstream audience is going to be like, huh?
Such a great soundtrack. And I own it on vinyl. I know you own it, I'm sure, on something. You don't find soundtracks like this anymore. Was this like an 80s thing?
What do you mean? Was it like an 80s thing?
Maybe in a 70s, 80s, where you would buy a soundtrack and it would have actual music, or you would buy like the theme songs from Halloween or Friday the 13th. I just don't feel like when I go watch a newer movie, I want that music to play in my home.
Most films I can think of, it was either score, and then it got to this era, and then you'd have, you brought up Halloween, you'd have Blue Oyster Cult, Don't Fear the Reaper, and then everything else was just kind of orchestra. This was one of the first movies where, like I say, the whole soundtrack were established bands of a certain genre that just put the whole vibe of the movie out there with it.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? I can't think of anything within even the last maybe 2 or 3 years that I would, horror movie wise, that I'd be like, need that soundtrack, need that one.
No, and that's why I referenced The Crow, because it seemed like when The Crow came out, then all of a sudden, like every Crow movie had a killer soundtrack, and that's when your early superhero Daredevil came out, had a good soundtrack. When The Matrix came out, that had had Rage Against the Machine and some other bands on there. there. And it just seemed like that real late 90s into maybe mid 2000s, everybody had a really good soundtrack with a shit ton of bands.
It's kind of like wrestling theme songs. You remember when like Stone Cold and Undertaker and Edge and all of these guys in the Attitude Era had really great theme songs.
And it was about the same time, again, we're getting away from Return of the Living Dead now, but when Daredevil came out and The Crow 3 Salvation came out and all that, that was about the time that you had all of these mains, Disturbed, My Chemical Romance, just to name a few. And then they actually bled over into pro wrestling. And that's when those wrestling theme songs, I think that's what you're talking about, got remade as mainstream rock songs.
Because it happened in the 80s with wrestling too. You knew everybody's theme song back then. You know, you knew Hogan's and you knew Piper's and you knew those guys. And then it just kind of stopped, I guess. Maybe we're just old and we like stuff from the 80s and 90s and it was better.
We are old. We're kind of like Bert and Ernie. Not from Sesame Street, Bert and Ernie from this movie. Yeah.
Who all the characters in this film were supposed to be like in their teens and like 40s. They're all in their 20s and 60s. They're all way older than they were supposed to be in the movie. But I don't know that matters. I don't need them to be teenagers. I almost like the idea that they're in their 20s better.
Yeah, I didn't know they were supposed to be teenagers. I just viewed them as, it reminded me of when I was in my 20s and I had to go hang out in the cemetery. I didn't have a beautiful naked Linnea dancing anytime I went. That's something too, is this was the first movie it was like my first naked woman that I saw. And I remember there was this kid that lived across the street. I was probably 10 years old, maybe 9. There was this kid that lived across the street from me, single mom. She worked all the time. She didn't care what he watched or she wasn't there anyway. And they had fucking HBO and I didn't. And I wandered over there one day and I walk in and here's Linnea nude dancing on the fucking tombstone. And I'm like, oh my God. And what's funny is, let's look into the psyche of Clint a little bit. I've always had a thing for short hair redheads and thigh highs. And I've never known. It's just my thing. It's just, you know, everybody has their own little weird quirks and, you know, whatever, and kinks. And so it used to drive the ex crazy. She used to hate it. She'd always bring it up.
Why don't you put your clothes on? The show's over.
What's the matter? Does it make you nervous? I'm hot.
So finally one day it hit me. I was like, I think I know why, because the first naked woman that I saw dancing on a tombstone was Linnea Quigley in this movie, and she had on thigh highs and short red hair.
Yeah, that's where it's got to come from. I mean, you could probably do an episode with like a psychiatrist and find out where all of our weirdness comes from.
Let's get Joe the psychologist back on, have him figure me out.
Yeah, it's all going to go back to these movies. It's all going to go back to Return of the Living Dead, The Incredible Melting Man, all of that weird stuff that we watched as kids. Maybe other kids were like, oh, we're watching The Breakfast Club.
It makes sense because The Incredible Melting Man is my fear of bushes. And then I'm always, now that I think about it, wow, this is weird. Sorry, everybody listening to have to diagnose me right now, but I am like huge on trimming bushes. Like seriously, like the kids joke about it, especially when we're at the library. I was always like, trim the bushes. Oh, look at that. We'll drive by like big boy and they didn't trim their bushes. And then that's kind of funny because going back to the Linnea Quigley thing, she actually had to trim her bush for this film because I guess when they did that nude scene of her dancing on the tombstone, it just so happened that one of the producers or somebody, I can't remember who, a bigwig showed up and said, you can't show pubes in a movie. So they made her shave. Then the person who made the call was like, oh my God, now it's worse. Now you can see everything. So they actually made this like prosthetic piece for her to put, over her vagina that made it supposedly look like she had a G-string on, but it didn't even work. So some of the times you can see definition of her anatomy and sometimes you can see nothing.
Yeah, and in today's society, it would be like no big deal. I was at work the other day and there was someone on the radio, a female artist, and I said, who is that? And my coworker said, oh, go check her out on TikTok. So the first video I pull up is this girl on stage and I was like, you can see her lips and not even the ones on her face. And she's like, that's why she's so popular. And I was like, what the? She's like singing in the middle of the daytime at a concert outside. I'm like, she cover up a little bit? Yeah, it's weird. I know about the prosthetic. Couldn't you just had her keep her underwear on?
Well, I think Dan O'Bannon, based off interviews that I've seen and things that I have read, I think he was a connoisseur of pornography. So you were probably going to bring this up in the recommendations, so I'm sorry if I'm beating you to it, but there in 2011, a Return of the Living Dead documentary came out called More Brains, which I highly suggest everybody watch if you haven't. And I remember the actress who played Tina talked about when she first met Dan O'Bannon that she went to his house for like a reading or a meeting or something, that he had pornography everywhere. And of course, that's how he met Jewel Shepard, who plays Casey in this film, who was originally going to be Linnea Quigley's trash character. And she used to be a stripper at a high-end gentleman's club. Yeah, I think that was kind of something that he wanted to put in here.
I don't hate him for it.
I read too that he thought that all of the female nudity would scare away females, and that wasn't his intention. I think it was like a hindsight thing. He was like, oh shit, I alienated some of my audience, but he was surprised to see that there were still in the theaters and stuff a huge female following of this movie. He made a statement that said, well shit, if I would have known that, I would have had Tom Matthews, wow, that shows you where my brain went, be nude also to appeal to the female audience also. I think he was a fan of nudity.
I like most things about this film. I guess one of the things I do not care for is that, and this isn't the film's fault, but that Tarman is the poster boy for this film, which is fine. You get a ton of Tarman stuff. Pretty much all the figures are Tarman. I want a half lady. You can find half ladies, but they're expensive. So I want like an affordable half lady, because to me, she's just as important in this film as a zombie as Tarman. You get some Linnea, you get some Tom, are there any other figures that you would even find?
So through distinctive dummies, you can get a Frank and a Freddy, you can get a Trash and a Suicide, and then Super 7 came out with, they call them Trash and Suicide, but it's the skeleton zombies from the poster, which I have those, and then they came out with another set, same thing, but they glow in the dark. NECA is getting ready to release a pretty detailed to up to par NECA of the same thing, Trash and Suicide from the movie poster. And of course you get the split dog from Trick or Treat Studios. You can get the Trax and Barrel from Trick or Treat Studios. NECA does a Tiny Toons, or is it Tiny Toons?
Yeah, I have the Tarman Tiny Toons.
Amic Toys does a Tarman, which I have 2 of those because my dumbass opened one and put it in my Return of the Living Dead fish tank. You're starting to see more and more. It's kind of been the past year and a half, 2 years has been like a fury of Return of the Living Dead merchandise,
which is making me poor.
Do you want to know what I have?
That script.
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about. I got a script signed by everybody. And of course, James Cairns passed away. Not Brian Peck. Brian Peck played Scuzz. Who was it that played Suicide?
Yeah, I know who you're talking about, but
Mark, I can't think of his last name. Of course, he's passed away. Well, Don Calfa's gone. I've got the Return of the Living Dead. Don Calfa, who played Ernie, did a graphic novel sequel to Return of the Living Dead. I've got one of those. I think I can't remember if it came with his autograph on it or not. Anyway, there's a lot of merchandise out there, but there could be more for sure.
Yeah, I have a poster that's got Tom, Linnea, John Russo, and Gary Striner, because we met them at Living Dead Weekend.
So a couple just random fun facts. They don't fit into the conversation flow here, but one is I found out that Dan O'Bannon, the director of this film, was supposed to play Frank. And then they had James Cairn come in and he just nailed it. And he was like, no, fuck that. I'm taking myself out of this. You are Frank. Something else that I got to mention, and if you watch the More Brains documentary, you'll learn a lot more about this. But Brian Peck, who plays Scuzz, couple things. First of all, he was like the driving force, one of the driving forces for keeping the franchise alive. He had a lot of involvement in part 2, a lot of involvement in part 3, and he just kind of seemed like he picked up the torch and carried it forward, trying to keep the franchise alive. But I did just learn that in the original Return of the Living Dead, when they first show the zombies breaking out of the coffins and climbing up through the dirt, that he is the zombie that they show clawing through the dirt up out of his grave.
I want to watch this again. This is something I could put on and just let it play. And I could even let it go to 2 and 3 and then start over.
This movie actually made me queasy one time.
Really?
When I was 16, I had my tonsils removed and I was just sitting home on the couch and I put it on and I felt icky. And I'd seen the movie 100 times already, but it was the beginning where the tar man's melting in the barrel. And for whatever reason, I was just like,
And I mean, the tar man's played by an absolute amazing puppeteer.
Alan Troutman.
Yeah, worked with Jim Henson and the Muppets and all this stuff, and he's the tar man.
A lot of people are surprised, and I was too when I met him at Scarefest in Kentucky a couple years back, that, the show Dinosaurs, that he has a lot to do. And it's funny because, so I watched this with Rebecca last night. The tar man came on the screen, and I told her that, and she knew exactly, and she like quoted one of the baby dinosaur characters or something, and it was just showed me that, I know horror, but all I had to do was say dinosaurs, and she's like, oh, baby, blah, 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 goddamn normies.
Would you say not the mama? It's what the baby used to always say, hit the dad and over the head with a pan or some shit. We got any more trivia? I mean, I have like 4 pages of trivia, but we could be here all damn day.
Again, I'm repeating myself, but if you are a trivia junkie, I highly recommend that you go to the Internet Movie Database and look up all the trivia fun facts. I highly, highly recommend that you look for the documentary from 2011, More Brains, and it will satisfy your need for brains, because it's called More Brains.
What do you think? Rate it?
Rate it.
10 out of 10. 10 out of 10 Rabid Weasels. This is one of my favorite films. It always will be. It kind of flips back and forth between this and My Bloody Valentine, so maybe 1A, 1B. I don't know that those two will ever get knocked out of the top spot. It would have to be something that's groundbreaking or something. It'd probably be something that's really like bad that people don't like. What do you think?
I think that's all you gave it was a 10. The hell's wrong with you?
Yeah, can you go higher?
Sure, we can do whatever we want. No, I'm just messing with you. So I give this a 9.999999999 naked Linneas out of 10. And seriously, just my only hang up, like I said before, is when Linnea is resurrected as a zombie, she looks like this weird, monstrous, Morbius vampire demon type thing. That kind of took me out of it for a second, but I mean, that's just the stupidest of hiccups. I love the grit of this movie. I love the realisticness of this movie. It reminded me of being like a teen around that time. Even though 84, I was still pretty young by the time it got to 88, 89. Like, it reminded me of a hot summer night being out in lower mid Michigan where I lived, you know? God, I just love this fucking movie.
Do you think they made her come back naked just to have her come back naked?
Yes.
They're just like, we need more of her naked. How can we do that?
She was interviewed once, and I think Linnea said something about, I don't know why they brought me back, but I was like, okay. Probably just to see me nude still, right? Yeah.
You know who I wonder why they keep bringing us back?
Who's that?
Our podcast network, the PFPN.
I don't even think we asked permission. We just like do it, right?
Yeah, I think so.
You're listening to the Prescribed Films Podcast Network, home to hundreds of hours of free podcast entertainment. The shows on this network all have a common goal, providing you with the best discussions about movies and other forms of entertainment media. The PFPN hopes to fill your earholes with audio joy. Visit our website with links to all the other amazing shows at www.thepfpn.com. Thanks for listening.
So now that we've heard from our podcast network, I want to give you some recommendations, a little this or that, or just recommendations. And the first film I'm going to talk about is from 2008. It's called Pontypool. Have you seen this one?
No.
About the radio DJ and zombies. And then the next one is one that I talked about earlier in the show from 2019, Blood Quantum, the Canadian zombie film. And then probably one of the funnest ones I've seen lately. And this is maybe fits with this film more because it's, I guess, a comedy. It's a short film. It's free on YouTube. You can go to the Alter channel and watch it. It's from 2022. It's called We Forgot About the Zombies.
Ooh, I haven't heard of this.
Yeah, and it's short. It's maybe 5-10 minutes long. I really enjoy this. It's a short. It's fun. Go check this one out if you're looking for something fun to watch. Yeah, there's a director that he does a lot of shorts and they're all super fun. Probably another one of his that you'd like, and I can't even remember what it's called. Maybe Death Metal is what it's called.
Deathgasm?
Well, it's kind of along the lines of Deathgasm, but it's a short, and it's about this kid that's playing music, and his dad gives him a guitar from his grandpa that was his grandpa made to deal with the devil, and it just goes off the fucking rails. And it's super short. It's, maybe 5 minutes long, but
send me a link or tell me so I can look it up. Yeah, I want to see it.
Definitely check out We Forgot About the Zombies. Pontypool's fun. Blood Quantum, I think, is just a good film.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd put Blood Quantum in the category of recommendations if you like Return of the Living Dead. It's kind of hard to say, not just list every fucking zombie movie, but Blood Quantum, the tone and the feel and the pacing are very night and day. And it's funny that I think that you didn't recommend any of the sequels of Return of the Living Dead. And it's funny because it's a point that I was going to bring up, and that is, I think every Return of the Living Dead sequel, besides part 3, because Brian Peck and his involvement in that, I think he realized, let's stop trying to recreate the lightning in the bottle, which is why it had a more serious tone. But I think that's exactly it. They were trying to recreate lightning in a bottle, and it's not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen with this Return of the Living Dead 2025 coming up later this year. I hope that they take it in a different direction. You can make some nods and stuff too, but you are never going to recreate the magic that happened on the set of the original Return of the Living Dead.
They have the new one with Linnea, and the original cast is all involved. Trash's Revenge, so I don't know what they're going to do there.
I'm glad you brought that up. I can't believe I didn't think about it, but that will probably be the closest that you can get to, just because it was the people who were there, so they know how it operates and how it feels and how the movie magic happened at that time. I am interested to see that as well. I want to throw out a couple recommendations. I usually don't do this. One, I'm just repeating, More Brains documentary, 2020 or 2011. Go watch it. If you're interested in the Return of the Living Dead universe, there is a podcast I wanted to recommend, and that is Rabid Weasel's podcast. I've heard a few episodes. To the best of my knowledge, all he covers is stuff from the Return of the Living Dead universe. I believe he's from across the pond. I think he just puts one out whenever the hell he wants to, so it's not like it's a weekly or a monthly show. But definitely, if you love listening to podcasts, if you love Return of the Living Dead, if you love zombies, go check out the Rabid Weasels podcast.
I should probably listen to that. Maybe I'll learn something.
I learned something. I forget what it was, but I learned it. I remember that.
A date which will live in infamy.
So on this day in horror, we're covering on this episode in horror. I should say episode. I feel like I change it every damn time.
Episode, segment, part of the show, installment.
Return.
Yeah.
We're covering January 19th through February 1st. And on January 19th in 1990, we had Brain Dead and Tremors.
Brain Dead, also known as Dead Alive, that is another zombie classic, and that rates right up there with Return of the Living Dead. Like, I think they fight for the number one spot. And then Tremors? Ugh.
They came out the same day. I would imagine the theater was not packed for both of those with the same kind of people.
No.
And then in 1996, you get From Dusk Till Dawn.
Well, were they psychos or?
They look like psychos? Is that what they look like? They were vampires. Psychos do not explode when sunlight hits them. I don't give a fuck how crazy they are.
Classic.
January 25th in 1943, Tobe Hooper's born. Weird how this works out. The universe that's weird because he was set to direct this film.
I wonder why he didn't direct this film.
Well, they couldn't get the money, so he's like, well, I need some money.
Oh, I see it.
So he had to go back and make Life Force. In 1963, you get The Raven. In 2005, you get G-String Vampire. No idea.
So G-String Vampire sounds like fun, but go back and watch The Raven because that's a Corman classic. Vincent Price, Peter Lorre.
And then 2016, Lucifer premiered on Fox. Have you ever seen that show?
No, I know about it, but I never. Didn't it have a couple seasons or something? 3 seasons?
Yeah, 3 or 4. I think it got canceled and then somebody else picked it up and carried it on till 6 seasons. January 29th in 1964, you get Children of the Damned.
Yeah.
In 1988, you get Sorority Babes and the Slime Bowl-O-Rama.
Yeah, now you're talking.
And you know who's in that one.
Linnea Quigley.
And then in 1993, you get a film that we've covered on the podcast, Matinee. How weird is it how this works? We get Brain Dead, we get Tobe Hooper, we get Sorority Babes, and we get Matinee. The universe is just weird how it works.
I don't know how Matinee fits in that equation, but
we've covered it. So,
okay, yeah.
They just all fall into the spookyverse with this film and stuff we covered in the past.
That makes sense. And don't forget that if you are a fan of Sorority Girls at the Slime Bowl-O-Rama, that a couple years back they made, was it on YouTube? Was it just a fan film? But it was made by, Kelly Maroney was involved and Michelle Bauer, I think. Anyway, there's a sequel.
Was it Troma? Not Troma. Full Moon, I think, had part of it.
I think you're right. I think Full Moon had something to do with it. It was all right. It was fun.
Yeah, it wasn't as good as the original, but that's all right.
Well, the original wasn't that good. Let's be honest.
Well, no, but
just because we love it doesn't mean it was good.
I think Linnea was naked in that too, right?
I think she was naked in everything she was in. I mean, she knew her assets.
So we got going on anything?
I don't know what the fuck's going on. I do know what the fuck's going on. All right, so this episode comes out Sunday, January 19th. Like I said, I've just got a lot of personal stuff going on right now. I've got 2 birthdays within the next couple weeks, as well as my oldest and her homecoming thing coming up shortly after this episode comes out. So I got a lot of that going on. Man, we are making plans, kicking ass, taking fucking names out to Haunting the Hills and psychotherapy, bouncing back and forth between, we've been revamping the costume room, which it may sound boring and stupid, but it is a fucking undertaking and it is going to change the way everything operates out there. The new team I put together, God, we work so well together. It's something that I've strived for over the years. And I finally figured it out last night. Actually, before this recording, we were out there making plans for another event I'm about to blab about. And then we hopped over to the costume room when we were working, and it hit me. Teams I've tried to assemble in the past to help me, produce these things that I want to do. I've always chose like-minded, but the same, like we all think exactly the same type people. And so there's conflict. What I did this time is everybody that I selected to be on this team brings a little something different. Yeah, we all have the same interests, but they bring a little something different to the table, and it works so well. So I'm learning a lot about collaboration and letting go and letting something breathe and be its own entity. So if you are trying to figure out how to get together with some people for any kind of project, that's my advice I can give is try to line up with people who will support you, but also bring something different to the table. I announced the Saturday, June 21st event out to Haunting in the Hills. I'm working on putting that together. But what I did announce is this just kind of evolved since the last time we recorded. Saturday, May 10th, halfway to Halloween, Washtenaw County Fairgrounds. I know it's a ways off and I'll be talking about it some more. We've actually covered them on the podcast before. We did a commercial for them. I've vended there with inkmirrors.com. They put on a haunted walkthrough. So it's a vendor show. It's a her show. There's a haunted walkthrough show. There's all kinds of things. And it's a huge crowd. Haunting in the Hills is going to be part of one of the many haunts that are there from Lower Mid Michigan for the haunted walkthrough. And it's just exciting. We get like a 20 by 20 space, and we're just going to basically haunt out a room. And then our actors are going to be roaming around the crowds. We're going to have a promotional table. The collector from Generational Trauma is going to be there with his hearse, Kirst Herman. So it's going to be an all-out good time media blitz for everything we got going on. So I got a lot of shit in the works right now. And Brian says he's got nothing. And that's the end of the show.
I am putting out feelers to hopefully get that screening going up in Burlington. I'm looking for some sponsors, so hopefully I can find some people, and we'll be showing some Severn films in Burlington.
You and I need to talk about maybe, see? The idea just hit me. I want to put on a show. I'm sorry to cut you off. I want to put on a show shortly before the haunt opens, and I haven't quite figured out what I want to do. You've expressed interest in potentially having Severn or something come up to the hills and show some movies there. Maybe we should talk about doing something in September before the haunt opens.
Yeah.
Like a double feature or something.
Yeah, something along those lines. I mean, I have Matt's information. I could always reach out to him. And, we'd kicked around the idea of maybe some wrestling stuff, or who knows what we may come up with.
Oh, that's all coming down the line for sure.
Yeah, I think, like we had said in the past, there's going to be stuff this year for us. But I feel like it's all just the train starting to pick up steam. You know how the old locomotives, they kind of had to chug. Yeah,
and I think our roles this year are going to be a lot more behind the scenes of stuff as opposed to being out and about and enjoying things. We're just going to be grinding out the details to put some of this shit in motion.
And hopefully we'll give people opportunities and places to go to see things that aren't in your area, aren't in my area. We'll get stuff for people that aren't normal to get out and do stuff.
So this I'm going to tease. I'm in the process of, with everything that I'm doing out there and everything that I'm talking about, and it seems like I tease this and I tease that. It's all real and it's happening. I'm just trying to keep the interest, and there's so many moving parts, but I'm also in the process of, this is kind of recently evolved. You say giving people opportunities to do things that they don't normally do. I'm working on something to give people the opportunity to be hands-on and be a part of some of these things as well. That's all I'm going to say about it right now. I'll tell you about it when we're done recording, Brian, because I haven't told you yet.
I'm excited for 2025. Maybe not most of the movies, but if we get some more Return of the Living Dead.
I can't wait to revisit Return of the Living Dead here at the end of 2025. That's it. We kicked off 2025 with Return of the Living Dead. We're going to end 2025 with Return of the Living Dead.
So until then, like and subscribe. Check out the I Like It Spooky Horror podcast on all the socials. Follow Haunting in the Hills on Facebook so you can keep up with all the stuff Clint's got going on.
It's a barrage, and I'm telling you, it's not a flash in the pan. It is real. It is real. Like Kurt Angle said, it's true. It's damn true.
And it won't suck like Kurt Angle did.
No.
So Indie Spotlight, Generational Trauma, Salute the Shorts, Appendages. What else? The Wrong Podcast died.
Well, and something we don't plug at that I don't think we've ever plugged is Rod, part of the Wrong Podcast died and part of Appendages. Go check out Rod's Horror Movie Cave on Facebook, where he does a lot of his own independent ratings and just kind of gives some synopsis. He
said the other day he's watched 1,352 films in the last 2 years, I think was the number.
So we got to look at this two ways. Okay. Do we either A, support him in his quest to do what he's doing? Or do we try to get people to not support him as an act of intervention to get him to, I don't know, step out of the house and interact with people?
I'm not sure. Is there like an old Blockbuster that you have like a meetings in the back room? Hi, I'm Rod. I'm a cinephile.
I haven't spoken to a real person in 3.5 years in person.
Well, enjoy Return of the Living Dead if you've never seen it. If you've seen it, go watch it again. Watch more Brains.
I'm going to go watch it again.
And come back at the end of the year so we can talk more Return of the Living Dead.
And we will see you then. Wait, we will talk to you then because we don't do a video platform. Plus, we don't do live podcasts, so we're not going to see a goddamn thing. Whatever, just come back. Listen to some more. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you get your musics, and listen. God damn it.
Bye.
What do you think this is all about? You think this is a fucking costume? This is a way of life.